Shalom, and thank you for watching this video from Aydat HaDerekh Synagogue. I hope you are liking the content we are bringing you. If you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that will greatly help us. And to further help bring great content to you from our teachers, if you could please consider to donate to Aydat HaDerekh Synagogue. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for watching.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
We're getting closer to Pesach. So for those of you listening on Facebook Live or the recording of Facebook Live, if you want to go to our website, we have a listing of do's and don'ts as far as food is concerned, fairly complete for Pesach. So please feel free to download that for yourself, copy it, whatever you would like, just intended to be helpful. So if you go to aydat.com, you'll be able to pull that up. It is today Shabbat Parah, the Shabbat of the Red Heifer. Now, there's several very special Shabbatot that we have that precede Pesach. It actually starts before Purim with Shabbat Zachor, which we had. And then we've got Shabbat Parah today, the Shabbat of the Red Heifer. And we have next week Shabbat HaChodesh, which is the Shabbat of the month, because it is the beginning of the month of Nisan, and this is to be for us the beginning of months, which is different than Rosh Hashanah, and we'll go over that next week. Then the Shabbat immediately before Pesach is Shabbat HaGadol, the Great Shabbat, which is traditionally the only time that the rabbi gets up and opens his mouth and talks, except for Yom Kippur. But we have become far more civilized than that, so I talk a lot. So let's be keeping in with talking. Let's talk about Shabbat Parah. Now, the Parah, the red heifer, comes from Numbers chapter 19, which is the maftir, the ending portion of the Torah portion today, even though the Torah portion is we're still in Exodus. The Torah portion is Kitisa, and then we have an additional portion, because it's Shabbat Parah, from Numbers chapter 19. Now, this is one of the reasons that synagogues have more than one Torah, is that you can pull out a Torah scroll that is rolled to Numbers chapter 19, and you have the other Torah scroll that is at Parshat Shvuah, which is Kitisa, different part of the Torah completely, and you're not sitting there rolling back and forth between them. You just have two different Torahs, and you use the appropriate Torah at the appropriate time during the service. We're actually going to talk about the Parah. Why a red heifer? Why a red cow? A young red cow. So young it could never have had a yoke put on its neck before. Can't have been, okay, so it's a calf. It's a young girl calf as opposed to a young boy calf, which is used a lot. Why? Well, this is a chok. It's one of Hashem's chukim. And when we get to the normal Torah portion, this is the beginning of Parshat Chukat, which is of the chok. The chok is not explained by Hashem. It says, do this. And then there's a long, elaborate ceremony that takes place surrounding the red heifer. So first off, it has to be a red heifer, completely red, not mostly red, completely red. It's got any color other than red in it, it's no good. Can't use it, right? So if you want mostly red, then you go with Billy Crystal. We're doing completely red, and in order to have the ashes of the red heifer. So you take this completely red heifer, and you do the slaughtering like you do with the sacrifices. Take the blood, and you do zrika, the splashing, if you will, toward where the Ark of the Covenant is. And then you take the rest of the red heifer and you burn it like you completely burn the Tamid offering every morning. This is done outside of the camp, though. It's done outside of the camp. And you don't just burn this calf. You also burn a piece of cedar wood, some hyssop, a sprig of hyssop, and a thread that has been dyed tola'at, which is that maroon red you see sometimes on the Torah cover or on the parochet of the ark. It's that color, tola'at. It's one of the three colors of the temple. Techelet, like for your tzitzit, tola'at, which actually symbolizes the kahuna, the priesthood. You wonder where the big kahuna came from. It means the priesthood. And the third color is what I tease with kids, is the pirate color, argaman, which is purple, royal purple. You've heard of royal purple? Well, guess who came up with it? Not us, God. God came up with the royal purple, which is made, by the way, with the same snail as we use to make the techelet. But I digress. Go figure. So a thread of tolat, the plank of cedar, and the sprig of hyssop are all burned together, and these ashes are collected. They are mixed with water, and mixed with water, and mixed with water, and mixed with water. There is no limit to the dilution. Okay? You can make as much of this water of cleansing, as you want. And that's what this water is used for. It's made for decontamination. The most contaminated stuff you run into can be decontaminated with the water of the ashes of the red heifer. If we come into contact with a dead body, we are, the translation is usually unclean. I kind of like contaminated. It's a little better, and I'll explain in a bit. And so in order to become decontaminated, you have to be sprinkled with the waters of the ashes of the red heifer. You got to wait a week, and you also have to take a mikveh. Right? So the old question about sprinkle or dunk, as far as a baptism, say that 3 times fast, a baptism is concerned, it's not a question. Both are Torah. You do both, different times, different reasons, but both are involved. Okay? So you go through these things, which basically it involves water, specifically the water of the ashes of the red heifer and the water of the mikvah. And time. You got to wait a week. Okay? And the waters of the ashes of the red heifer can decontaminate anything. So it's used to decontaminate the area where we're going to park the Mishkan, or we're going to build the temple. So if we're going to rebuild the temple, before we begin work on the building of the temple, we have to have the water of the ashes of the red heifer. It means we've got to have the red heifer, and we've got to go through this ceremony. Then we have the ashes of the water of the red heifer. And we sprinkle it on the area we're going to put down for the temple, and then we can start building on it. Okay? So then we have the water of the ashes of the red heifer. And what happens when you start to run low? You dilute it. You just add water. You know, it's Krusty's makes a wonderful pancake mix. Just add water. It's the same thing. Just add water. We keep going until, for some bizarre reason, you lose it. I believe historically we have had 6 red heifers that we have sacrificed and created the waters of the red heifers, of the red heifer, in the history of Judaism. And we're going to have one more. Hopefully we won't need another one after that, because we can just keep diluting the water. It's good to go. So it's one of the things that is going to be an indicator that Mashiach is coming very, very soon. Now, contaminated and decontaminated, clean and unclean, tuma and tahara. We don't deal with this much today. The reason we don't deal with this so much today, I think, is predominantly because of the rise of Reform and Conservative Judaism in the U.S. Orthodox synagogues all have mikvahs. In fact, oral tradition tells us for building a new synagogue, the first thing you build is the mikvah. Then you build the synagogue, because the mikvah is important. Because being decontaminated, being tahara, is important. Now, it's not particularly important physically, right? This isn't so that we should, get soap on a rope and have at it. We're supposed to do that anyway. This is something different. We're supposed to do it before. The nice mikvahs that are around, ladies turn into mini spa events. And they've got all of the wonderful showers and lotions and all of the things that make ladies feel good. And they go in and they have an experience. And in the midst of the experience is this decontamination before Hashem. It's really a wonderful time for folks to get together. And a lot of guys have it on their side also. And a lot of guys do it before every Shabbat. You just go, do the mikvah. Not at the same time. Usually there's two different doors. You lock one door and the other one, and okay, you get the idea. Being clean or unclean is a spiritual condition. And by spiritual, remember the word spiritual doesn't really exist in Hebrew. It's not there. It's always talking about one of the types of the souls that every one of us has. This is talking about ruach, and it's talking about neshama, specifically neshama. If you are contaminated here in time and space, your neshama is contaminated. And so you decontaminate here in time and space so that your neshama will become decontaminated. Because there's a connection between time and space and beyond time and space. Remember what C.S. Lewis said, that we are souls that happen to have bodies, not the other way around. The majority of our existence is truly beyond time and space. It's a tough thing to wrap our heads around, and it's an even tougher thing to remember, but this is the reality of our existence. It's because of that reason that Tumah and Tahara, that contaminated, decontaminated, clean and unclean, is important. Functionally, what we're not allowed to do, if we're contaminated, is go into the temple. Period. You can't go. Well, there is no temple, so we can't go. So who cares? And the reason we care is because this is a condition of our neshama, our ruach, which is the majority of our existence. So we want to pay attention to this. There are not a lot of teachings about Tumah Tahara, for reasons I went into before. It's kind of been dropped from Reform and Conservative Judaism. Still very much a part of more Orthodox or Haredi Judaism. And when it is taught, it's frequently taught, and within Christianity, as something evil, that you've been a bad person. You've sinned. That's why you're unclean. Unclean is it's sinful or it's sin. This ceremony creating the waters of the ashes of the red heifer is truly a lesson that teaches us that this is completely false. It's completely wrong. There are people that do righteous acts, that in those righteous acts, they become unclean. They become contaminated. This is a condition that we get into living our lives in time and space. It's not particularly desirable. It limits us from going into the temple, but it's not an indicator of sin at all. It's a condition. You take care of the condition. You take care of it. That's all. To paraphrase, stuff happens. So you take care of it. But it doesn't have anything to do with sin. If you read Numbers chapter 19, what you see is that every step of the way, the priesthood is involved in creating the waters of the ashes of the red heifer. And every step of the way, everybody who's involved becomes contaminated by obeying Hashem's directive. By doing a righteous act. He's obeying Torah. Obeying Torah, going in, guess what? Becomes contaminated. Has to go and become decontaminated. What's the sin? There's no sin. They were doing something. They were following Torah. It's the opposite. It's a righteous act. There is no connection between unclean and sin. Right? There's not a connection one way or the other. You can sin and be unclean. You can sin and not be unclean. You can do a righteous act and be clean. You can do a righteous act and be unclean. They're not related. They're not a function of one another at all. So when we become unclean, it's just something we take care of. That's all. Ladies become unclean. They do. Baruch Hashem that they do, because that's how we make babies. Beautiful babies like Aydat and Talia and even Trey, who we call Bam Bam. This is part. Young men. So we don't talk about this enough. Young men. You get an emission, guess what? You're unclean. And believe me, it happens to young men, and it happens a good bit. Is it sinful? Is it evil? No. It's something you take care of. It's just something you take care of. Okay? If you touch a dead body, you become unclean. All right? So think about in times of war. You know, in the Tanakh, you might have had half of the children of Israel were involved in battle and were touching dead bodies. Guess what? They all got to go to the mikveh, and then you got to have a lot of water of the ashes of the red heifer to take care of that. But you did. You know, I teased Dr. Howard, and he says, please don't use me as an example anymore, so I don't. Other doctors. You know, if you lose a patient, you're working to save the life of a patient. Pikuach nefesh. You're trying to save the life of a patient. Sometimes you don't. Guess what? You're unclean. What do? Oh, you got to take the mikveh. You wait. That's what you do. It's simply part of life. It's actually something we should be celebrating. It's something we should be celebrating because this is something, a mechanism that Hashem has given us to clean our neshama. Think about that. It is for us mentally to reconnect with our existence beyond time and space. Whenever we do a mikveh, that's what we're doing. It's what we think about. Is it splashing in the water, making sure you dunk 3 times, dunk 7 times? Is that it? And the answer is, that's not it. It's what that does. And our neshama is different after we've done it. Even though the neshama is outside of time and space. Because we've done it within time and space, our neshama is different. Okay? So there's things in the New Testament also. A woman who's ill, right? She has a discharge. So it goes. And she's been ill a long time, so she wants to go in and have Yeshua heal her. And grabs her robe, or his robe. And the sickness stops. The question is she unclean? The answer is, of course she's unclean. She's been sick for a long time. What does she have to do? Water and time. Then she'll be fine. Right? We have the leper. The leper is in leprosy. It's a rot. You're unclean. Yeshua heals him. Does he have leprosy anymore? Does he have tzaras? No tzaras. Is he unclean? Yes. He's still unclean. He's got to go through the ritual. What does Yeshua say? Go to the Kohen. He's part of this ritual. He'll inspect you. You do your mikveh. You wait until sunset. And then you're good to go. Because you have cleaned not only yourself, but your neshama as well. It's not only the physical condition that we're talking about. It is the resultant condition of your neshama. It is the resultant condition of that part of you which is beyond time and space. That part that we don't think about enough. And we should. So now's our chance. Now's our chance. You want a reason to do a mikveh? There you go. Can you go overboard with the mikveh? Absolutely you can go overboard with the mikveh. This is a problem with the Essenes in Yeshua's time. They were taking 2 and 3 mikvahs a day. Why? Because being out in the world, guess what? You become unclean. Not recognizing that Hashem structured the world so that simply being in it, we're going to become unclean. And that this is a mechanism for us to recover from that condition and to reconnect our minds with our neshama. It serves purposes. And that if you're constantly jumping in the mikveh and jumping in the mikveh and jumping in the mikveh, guess what? It sort of loses its meaning, doesn't it? It's kind of like blowing the shofar. You know? If you blow the shofar 4 or 5 times a week, when Rosh Hashanah comes around, we don't blow the shofar in our congregation until Rosh Hashanah. Well, we'll practice during the month of Elul like we're supposed to, and we blow it on Rosh Hashanah. Look how special it is for Rosh Hashanah. Right? That final shofar blast on Yom Kippur. Well, for me, that's like special. Really special. Okay? But part of the reason it's special is that we don't do it all the time. We shouldn't do it all the time. It loses its specialness. So in the same way, that's how we look at the mikveh. We do it. We should do it regularly. You know? Bezrat Hashem, maybe the congregation will grow big enough someday. Maybe we'll be able to build a mikveh with the congregation. Shabbat Shalom. And Shabbat Parah Shalom.